You can carry on chatting as you were before.
Okay.
This is it
No,
wrong?
we're going, so you
No.
can start at any point, but you felt like you guys were in the middle of conversations, so...
Okay.
Should we start? Shall I start?
Yeah,
Shall
just
I
start.
ask my
Yeah,
first question?
Or you don't have to. We can just chat about, anything, whatever.
Here we can. I think this will lead it nicely on.
Exactly.
So you ready?
Just let it flow.
Yeah. Good?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're rolling, mate. We're rolling. It's
John
going.
Frieda, hair god, hair mogul, the creator,
overdo it.
the
Don't
creator
overdo it.
of the global smash hits, Frizzies and sheer flaunt.
Sheer flaunt.
You like sheer flaunt? We try that bit
That's
again.
coming out
Try
next.
that bit again. So John Frieda, hair god, hair mogul, creator of the global smash hits Frizzies and Sheer Blonde. At the beginning of your career, when you first started as a hairdresser, did you ever dream that you would be this successful?
No, not at all. I, to be honest with you, when I think back, all those many, many years ago, hard to remember it now, it was so long ago, but actually, I never really thought that much about the future, and I don't know why that was. It was just something in my nature, my character. It was very much, I always remember that I was very focused in the moment and like what I'm doing now. And of course I thought, I'm not saying I never thought about the future. I mean, you all think like one day I wonder where this will take me. And I knew that I wanted to be successful for sure. But I didn't really have like long-term plans. My focus was always on whatever it is I'm doing right now in this moment, I want to do it to the best of my ability. And I think that was, a very good way of good quality to have in whatever you're doing. But in work, obviously to be successful, you have to be good at what you do, of course. I mean, it goes without saying. And I think a lot of people, and I think particularly today with all the kind of social media and short attention span that is going on for young people, it's quite hard, I think, for people to really focus on something. Often they're doing something, they're working on something. I mean, I see it with my kids, they're doing their homework or they're working, but they're like thinking of something else, or their phone's going, I think in my day, that just wasn't the case. So I was really always, if I was shampooing somebody's hair, if I was sweeping the floor, what I was doing, I was putting my whole self into it, my heart and soul into it, and thinking like, I want to do this really well. And I think when you work in that way, and certainly this was my experience in my life, is that you didn't really have to think so much about the future, because it just seemed that way of working, that
it would happen.
Like doors opened, and all throughout my life, I feel that whenever I got to points in my life where I needed to shift in some way or change in some way or grow in some way, that it kind of just seemed to come along. And I do think there is some kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say it's a mystical experience or anything, but I do think there's when the mind is often the thing that causes problems for most people. Overthinking things, thinking too much, worrying about, what you did yesterday, worrying about what.
So you wasn't a worrier?
Well, I was a worrier, but I think that somebody once said to me, what has happened in the past is gone. You can't do anything about it. And what's going to happen tomorrow, you don't know what it is. So why worry about it? Let it go. And I think that was very much the way I tried to live my life. Just, if I'm cutting somebody's hair, whatever I'm doing right now, focus on that. And I think that tends to lead, it's like a flow, and it leads you into the next thing. And also it's just much more enjoyable and much more satisfying, and you do a better job when you think in that way.
How driven was you at the beginning, out of 10?
probably 20. I you know, again,
silly question, I suppose.
What?
Silly question.
Well, I just, again, I mean, you know, one thing I've learned in my life is you have to be like true to who you are. You have to know who you are. Like, you know, you don't want to go through life being somebody else or trying to be somebody else. I mean, we can all have role models and people we want to aspire to, you know, or to think of, you know, that they've inspired us in some way or that we can learn from them. But at the end, every individual person, there's nobody like you. You know, you are the only one of you. And to try and understand what you, like intuitively, instinctively in you, in your gut, what feels good for me and what doesn't, I think is really important. So I was, you know, in terms of being driven, I think that, again, this was just where I got this from. I have no idea, but from a very early age, I always wanted to do things very, very well. And, you know, to do things well, you have to drive yourself. You know, you have to put in the extra mile. You have to put in a lot of effort. And you know, I think, again, a lot of today, I see a lot of, you know, young people who are a bit like, well, you know, I want to achieve success or I want to achieve a goal, but, you know, how much effort do I have to put into it? And, you know, is it worth it? You know, am I prepared to put that much effort in to get this reward? And I never really thought like that. I never really thought actually about the reward. I always thought, you know, that the action itself, the thing you're doing is the reward. So if you're cutting somebody's hair or even like sweeping the floor, my attitude was always, this is going to be the best haircut that this woman has ever had. That was my focus. I never thought, and I'm going to be paid X for it. Or, you know, the money side of it, not that it's not important, because of course it is, but I think we often focus too much today on the reward, on how much am I getting paid for doing this job, and is it worth the effort? And I never thought like that. I always thought like any job that I do is worth doing. I guess it's like, you know, old cliches. I remember my dad, you know, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. So whatever I was doing, I just wanted it to be the best. I didn't think about how much time it was going to take me, or, you know, I could be doing something else and earning more money. And I do think that was a really good way of working, because the money then came, you know, and I think we live in this age of people are just, they're thinking too much the reward without, you know, how much money can I make at the least amount of effort? And I was the opposite. I was like, I'm going to put the maximum effort into everything I do and not worry about the money.
It's a great attitude, because when you was growing up, you was watching your grandfather, who was a barber, you know, cutting hair in Fleet Street. You was watching your father, who owned his own salon. He was a hairdresser. What was your earliest thoughts and memories watching your grandfather and your father working in hair?
Well, sadly, I never saw my grandfather work, because he died when I was very, very young. I mean, I think it was about 3 or 4, and so I never really saw him. But of course, I heard endless stories from my dad, you know, about him and about his life, and of course, my father started out in Fleet Street working for my grandfather, because he had a barber shop, and I mean, my dad was great, always telling incredible stories about, you know, the times when he was there. And he's what they called in those days, he started off as the lather boy. Okay, that was the guy, because in those days they would come in and be shaved in the morning. It was in Fleet Street, so it was the law courts and people, newspaper barons and all those guys would come in, and they'd come in every morning for their shave. And he was the guy that would foam up the lather and go and put the lather on, and then my grandfather would come in. Yeah, nice. So, so I remember all of that. And of course, my whole father's family were all hairdressers, my uncles, aunts.
So you grew up amongst
So I grew up around it. And my earliest memory of my dad was, he had a little hair salon in Ealing, and it was a tiny shop. I mean, it was literally like, I think they had 4 chairs. And to get into the shop, you had to walk through a sweet shop, which, of course, as young kids, we were always, you know, we would go through and buy sweets and then go into the back where his little salon was. And I remember that. And, you know, I mean, I've see it now, with two little hood dryers and, these. It's funny, I can remember the chairs, because we would often, as young kids, be in there and sitting around, sitting on the chairs, getting them to go up and down and backwards and forwards and all these things. So I do have a very, very vivid memories of that time, yeah.
And you as an academic, gifted student, I mean, you could have gone into any profession you wanted to. Your dad wanted you to be a doctor, and he was adamant to begin with for you not to be a hairdresser. But what was it? Why did you choose hair? Was it a moment? Was it an incident? What was it that got you?
It wasn't something that I have to say I'm particularly proud of. It was really, I think, I was kind of doing pretty well at school, and I had an ambition that I was going to go to university and become a doctor. And of course, both my parents were thrilled about that. And unfortunately, at the age of about 15 or 16, I suddenly started getting distracted, shall we say, by things that often distract 16-year-old boys. And, I started going out a bit and partying, and without realizing it, my studying kind of went by the wayside. So when I came to do my exams, I was quite shocked that I didn't do as well as I should have done or would have expected to be. And I think at that point, and this was, in the 60s, and it was like there was a lot of exciting things going on in, the Beatles.
Yeah.
It was a real changing time in society from, my parents' era. And I just met up with a really fun crowd of kids my age, and we were just having fun. And the thought then of going back to school and retaking the exams that I hadn't, done well in was just, I can't be bothered to do this. And I just thought, I want to get out and get a job. And it was a bit of a ploy, actually, because I sort of went to my dad and I said, Dad, I've decided I don't want to be a doctor anymore. I want to be a hairdresser, and I'm going to come and work for you in his little salon in Ealing. And of course, he was like furious, and lots of very intense conversations ensued. But one thing about me is I'm quite determined, and when I make up my mind I want to do something, there was no, turning back. And then in the end he just said, look, if it's really what you want to do and it's what you think is going to make you happy, I'm not going to stand in your way. But don't...
he had one condition, didn't he?
Well, his condition was, you're not going to work for me in my small London little suburban salon. I'll get you a job in a top salon in London.
And at the time, there was two big names. Yeah. There was Vidal Sassoon and there was Leonard's, right? Yeah. And you chose Leonard's. Why Leonard's?
Well, actually, he chose Leonard's.
Right, why did he choose Leonard's?
And again, I mean, it's so crazy how life works out. Leonard had a brother called Lou, who had a little tool shop in Ealing in one of the little back streets. And Lou's wife would go to my father's salon, and my father would do her hair, and she would be constantly sort of regaling him of stories of her famous brother-in-law who was jetting off somewhere to do Elizabeth Taylor's hair or, whatever.
This is Leonard.
This is Leonard, who was, her brother-in-law. And so that's how my dad knew of Leonard. I mean, of course, he knew about Vidal because everybody knew about Vidal. I remember as a very young kid going up to the West End one day with my parents, and we were walking down Bond Street, and Vidal's first salon was there, and my dad was peering through the window and he's saying, look, there's no dryers, because of course
cut and blow dry.
It was all cut and blow dry, and that was so revolutionary. I mean, you didn't have a salon without loads of hood dryers. And he was like aghast, they don't have dryers in there. So my dad of course knew of Vidal, as everybody did, but Leonard wasn't as well known, although within the business he was. I mean, I think Vidal clearly was a genius, no question about it. But
so was Leonard, wasn't he?
But Leonard was a genius in a very, very different way, because whereas Vidal revolutionised hairdressing with cut and blow drying,
he was a hairdresser, wasn't he?
Leonard had trained with somebody called Rosa Vansky, who was more from the Carita school in Paris of coiffeurs and beautiful hairstyling, which of course was in the 50s and 60s. And so Leonard could cut hair brilliantly, but he also could style hair brilliantly. And he, most importantly, had an extraordinary eye. So he had great style, great taste. The thing about Leonard, when he cut hair or styled hair, he wasn't looking at the hair, he was looking at the face. You know, he was looking at the person. It wasn't just focused on the hair. It was, he saw the hair, as of course it is, as part of the whole. And I think a lot of what I experienced with a lot of the Vidal Sassoon, this is not a criticism because it worked brilliantly, but it was very much the haircut. And I think that, you know, and I certainly tried to train all of my assistants and my staff during the training nights to focus, you know, on the face. And in fact, there was a time when I managed to get hold of an artist, a teacher from the Royal College of Art, who taught portraiture, you know, drawing portraits, pencil portraits. And I had them come in once a week and train all of my assistants to draw faces. And of course, they were like, why are we learning to draw faces? Yeah. I'm here to be a hairdresser. Yeah. And I said, no, you know, one of the most important skills about a hairdresser, and perhaps the hardest, is to really look at a person's face, because when you cut somebody's hair, you're completely changing the person's face. And you have to really understand, you know, proportions, face shapes from every angle. And the hair, you know, has to complement that and bring out the best features or detract from the worst features. And, you know, drawing people's faces really makes you focus on their face shapes.
So how much energy did you put into training your assistants, and how did you find, you know, your new talent?
Well, you know, it's funny because when I was an assistant working for Leonard, I never really remembered him actually teaching me anything. I learnt from watching him, basically. And
so they never had model nights?
We did have model nights, but I mean, basically on a model night, I was just practicing what I'd been seeing him doing during the day. And, you know, this is kind of a little bit of a weird story in a way, but it's a very important story for me. And I certainly credit this experience in my life as being one of the most important experiences I've ever had. And I mean, I was, you know, 16, 17.
Tell me.
And I had met a friend who was into meditation and sort of Eastern philosophy, and I started reading all these books about Eastern philosophy, and there was one...
And how old was you then?
17.
17.
And there was one particular book, which is actually a very famous book in India, although, and in America, I mean, probably nobody would have heard of it now, but at the time in the 60s and 70s, it was a very big best-selling book, and it was called Autobiography of a Yogi by someone called Paramahansa Yogananda. And it was a story of an Indian guru and his disciple. And the book was written by the disciple. And there's, you know, Indian philosophy is very varied and dense and deep, and I mean I could talk about it for months, but there are different forms of discipleship, if you like, and there's one particular form which is called bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of devotion, where you devote yourself to the guru. So you become his devotee, you're there to serve, you're there to do everything he wants, and through this process his teaching and his wisdom just kind of pours into your heart. It's not a practical process. It's just through your devotion, your heart is open, you're so open to the teaching that you kind of learn, it's almost you imbibe his teaching. And so I was reading this book when I was Leonard's assistant, and I kind of modeled myself on this idea of like Leonard was my guru, the guru of hair, and I was his disciple. So I made a conscious decision that my entire life at that moment in time was going to be devoted to just being the best assistant he has ever had. And I took it to the most extraordinary lengths. So, for example, Leonard would walk into the salon, his client would be sitting there, I would be standing there waiting with all his equipment laid out. And he didn't really say, you know, John, hand me the comb or hand me this, whatever. He was focused on the client. He would say, oh, hello, Mrs. So-and-so, whatever.
Think for him.
And my thing was that I never wanted him to ask me for anything. I wanted to know exactly what he wanted before even he knew. So in order to do this, I had to focus so much on his hands and the hair and what he was doing. And I had all the equipment laid out. So, for example, what would happen is that he would be chatting away to the client or whatever, or cutting the hair, and he would just put out his hand, and in his hand, I would put exactly what he needed, exactly in the right place. So we didn't even have to the comb was there, so all it was closing. It was this sort of, like Zen in the art of hairdressing. It was like Zen in the art of being an assistant. It was this very, very much this kind of, it almost became like this dance where I was always watching his hands, always looking where the equipment was, always having whatever he needed ready for him before he knew it. And he never once had to say to me, John, I need this, I need that. I knew it before. Now, when you have that intensity of focus on something, you really learn. There's nothing distracting
you. Not daydreaming.
So his hands, I was watching his hands all the time, with such intensity and such focus that when I got my model on Model Height, I was just doing what he was doing. It wasn't like, it didn't have to tell, nobody had to come and say, do it this way, do it that way. It's a bit like, children learn from their mothers.
Instinctive sort of.
Sorry?
Instinctive sort of.
Yeah, well, it was just, you were so in the moment. You were so, the concentration, the focus was so extraordinary that you just picked it all up. And so I just found that my hands were even to this day, if I was to cut somebody's hair, I see Leonard's hands moving, and so when I trained my staff, I think I always felt the majority of their training was done on the floor during the day in the salon. I always had assistants working for me, and obviously I picked the ones that I thought were the most gifted or most talented. And, we did have training nights, of course, but the training nights were focused on what they were seeing during the day on the floor. And that was kind of, and then things like, as I was saying, the art classes were very useful to people because, I always felt that in hairdressing, the actual skills, the practical skills are not that hard to learn. It's not hard for somebody to learn how to waft a comb and a pair of scissors and a brush. Those things are relatively easy. The most difficult thing, I think, to teach somebody is what I would call the art of visual perception, of looking at a woman, looking at the face shape, or a man, or whatever. And my process was I would sit the client down first, and I would, particularly if it was a new client, and I would obviously chat with them and, hello, how are you, whatever, and ask them what they were why they were here, what they wanted, whatever. And I would be listening to what they were saying, but actually my focus was I'm looking at their face as they're talking, looking at it from the side. So I'm hearing their words, but really I'm not, they might come in with something very specific, I want my hair cut short, or I don't want it cut short, or whatever. Okay, so you hear all that. Okay. But I'm also taking myself out of that, and I'm thinking, if this person came to me and said, do whatever you want, and often they did, what would I do? So you have this process of listening to what they're saying, so that's information about them, which is important to get. But also, I'm here, they're coming to me for my advice, my expertise. I think I probably know a lot more about their hair and about how they should look than maybe they do. Because that's my what I do. And that's why they come to me. So I would be analysing their face shape, their this, and I would be there's an intuitive sense, I think, that's very important to develop as a hairdresser, which is not, again, it goes back to the meditation. It goes back to getting out of the mind, not thinking it, but feeling it. It's an emotional thing. Beauty is an emotion. It's not a thought, So when you see something beautiful, you get an emotional feeling about it. So my process was to look at this person and look at their face, look at move their hair around, how by moving their hair around. First of all, I would actually take the hair off the face completely, and I would just study the face. And I'd be doing this as they're talking to me or not. I'd look at the face from the front without hair. I'd look at the hairline, I'd look at their features, I'd turn their head to the side, I'd look at the relationship of their head to their body. Are they thin? Are they, whatever. And I would sort of get out of my mind a little bit and just get
Try to
like
fit
a feeling.
it like a couture suit.
I mean, if you what an artist, you know, it's a bit like the difference between an artist and a draftsman. You know, an artist, when they paint, they're not thinking, they're just in this very emotional, creative space of emptiness, if you like. And that's when the mind is empty, and there's actually been a lot of research about this as well, with mind mapping and all kinds of things. When the mind is empty, you open yourself up to creative force, to intuition, you know, to inspiration. Inspiration, the word inspiration, it comes from spirit, you know. And when the mind is, when you're not thinking, you're not in your mind, and you're in a meditative state, this inspiration intuitively
How long have you been
comes
meditating for, John?
I started when I was 16.
16. And how often would you do that?
I mean, I'm doing it now. I'm doing it all the time. I mean, notice.
So you don't need pot?
No, I mean, I think the thing about meditation is that it's like anything. It's like a practice. You know, when you start for the first time, you have to focus on it. You have to sit there and you have to tell yourself not to think, and, you know, then a thought comes in and you have to whatever. But over the years, when you do it a lot for many, many, many years, it sort of becomes more like your natural state. So I don't feel that, you know, I'm meditating or I'm not meditating. I mean, most of my conscious day, I'm not saying I'm meditating, but I'm in that space of not in my mind. You know, I'm not just thinking. I don't go around thinking all day. I think when I have to think about something. If I have a problem or, you know, then I'll think. But the rest of the time, I'm not thinking. I'm just like in a state of awareness. So if I'm walking down the street, I'm just watching everything around me. I'm watching...
Being in the moment again.
Yeah, people... I mean, I'm aware of people walk down the street. I look at their faces and I'm like, oh, that person's pretty stressed out. Or, oh, they're quite happy. Or, do you know, it's like this being very aware. Again, it's being in the moment. It's being aware. It's not... When you're in your mind, you close yourself off to what's going on around you. But when you're not in your mind, you're open to everything around you, and you feel it, and you see it, and you experience it. And those things are incredibly useful, and particularly as a hairdresser, having that ability to sit with a client and really be open to everything about them. You know, you'll have a client you can see they're very uptight, they're nervous. Some clients will come in and say, the first thing I will say is like, I don't want my hair short. You know, like because
or do anything.
Or they're terrified that they've had bad haircuts in the past where people have cut their hair short and they've hated it. So they're like, you know, defensive right away. Don't cut my hair short. I'm like, okay. But, you know, maybe you might, after talking to them, seeing them, maybe it would look great if they had their hair short. So then it's like, but what I would always do is they would say, I just want half an inch off or something like that, or an inch or whatever, because they're nervous. And I'd say, okay, fine. And I'd start cutting it. And then they'd say, this is classic, if I said you do whatever you want, what would you do? And then, you know, like, so you're already, you know, they've started by putting up the defences and you've come back to them with, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything horrible. So you can relax. So they're at ease. So then comes the next question. If I did let you do something, what would it be? And now they're like, they're curious.
How often did that happen?
I think it would happen quite a lot. I don't know, but new clients who hadn't been to you before, particularly I think, you know, you get all types of people. You know, some kids some clients will be, oh, do what you want, I don't care.
Every time.
You know, I don't care. Like, do what you want.
Yeah.
Others are very nervous, you know, what they're going to...
And tell me, what was Leonard's like? When you know, I'd like to ask you a few questions about your experience when you was training. What was the Leonard's salon like when you started there?
I mean, to me, it was walking into a different world, you know, because I'd come from the suburbs and I hadn't mixed with celebrities or famous people. I mean, I'd seen it on TV, but that was, you know... So, you know, I walk into this incredibly grand salon on Upper Grosvenor Street.
How many floors was it?
It was on 6 floors.
Wow.
I mean, it was the most extraordinary
How many people
place.
worked there?
Oh, probably like 150 staff.
Wow. And how many assistants?
40, maybe
40 assistants.
30, 40 assistants.
And what on your first day, you've turned up as an apprentice.
Yeah.
How was you feeling? Was you nervous? Was you excited? Was there any mistakes?
I wasn't nervous. I was kind of, yeah, I mean, I guess I was excited. I mean, I was eager and keen and like, it was the beginning of a whole new period of my life. And I was, yeah, I mean, I was excited to start, but I was always quite serious. You know, I got there and I remember being met by somebody. I got there very early. I think it was the first one there. There was a stylist there.
That's a good sign.
I think so, you know, and he said, you know, can you shampoo? And I said, yes, I know how to shampoo. And he got me to shampoo his first client, and that was it, really. But there were a couple of things that stood out now when I look back, which I think were so important to me and really kind of set me on the road to you know, everything really, was that I remember there was a head junior who I was assigned to, and they said, you know, he'll show you around and what you're supposed to do. And this guy was, he said, you know, he showed me the ropes and how things worked. And he said, look, the worst job, and you really need to avoid this job if you can, because it's horrible, is if you have to fold the towels, because in the basement there was this big hot steaming sort of boiler room. And these towels would come down in the like bucket loads, right? I mean, you go in there and there would be a mountain of wet towels that had to be dried and then they had to be folded. And it wasn't the most exciting job.
Takes a lot of time folding them towels.
And it takes a lot of time. So anyway, I listened to him. I said, okay, fine, whatever. And then, of course, I got the job of folding the towels. And I remember clearly being in this boiler room with all these towels. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to fold these towels better than anybody has ever folded a towel. Okay, it was like this sort of mindset. And again, I think this came from my reading the book, well, from my father, jobs worth doing, sort of thing, and also the autobiography yoga of devotion, doing something
doing it well,
really
taking
well,
pride in
and
what you
thinking
do.
of it, yeah. And so I started folding these towels, and every towel was like perfectly folded, and then I'd put one on top of the other, so it was like this little, you know, kind of sculpture of towels, and then I would sort of take them up and put them on the shelf, and then I'd put the other one there, and I'd step back and make sure they were, you
like
know,
a piece of art.
Yeah, and of course it was kind of a little crazy because nobody really would ever do that. But for me, it was really important because, first of all, I actually enjoyed folding the towels. It made a boring, sort of mundane job actually quite fun. The time went by quickly. It was like, oh my God, I've done it. And it's just seemed like minutes, and I was there for ages. But the most important thing was that Leonard, who had his own assistant, and of course was always wanted the best person to be his assistant, his assistant had left and he was looking for a new assistant. And he said to the manager, who's that new kid who folds those towels? I want him to be my assistant, because if he puts that much care and attention to folding a towel, yeah, and so I think that's a really good message for young people, because most of the kids would be like, oh, folding towels is so boring. I don't want to be folding towels. I want to be doing this. I want to be doing that. Again, it goes back to focusing in the moment of what you're doing and doing it to the best of your ability, and the doors will open. And it was the same, like if I'm sweeping the floor, my thought process was, this floor is going to be swept cleaner than it has ever been swept. And it was, it was kind of like I got into this whole, rhythm of sweeping the floor and how I was using the brush. And it just, I don't know what made me that way.
Was your father like that?
Yeah, I don't think he was quite as sort of anal and meticulous as me.
But did you get inspired
he definitely, by him? I always remember my dad, I have a very vivid image of him when he was painting the outside of our house where we lived, and he put the scaffolding up. And it was a very hot day, and he had his like handkerchief on his head, and he's painting away. And I was sitting in the garden, standing there watching him, and I kept, as he was painting it, step back and looking, admiring his work, and like
taking pride in it,
and doing it well. And you're just painting the house, but I do think, everybody is in such a hurry to be successful and famous and make loads of money. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want, I'm not. But the way to do that, you can't just say, I want to be rich, famous, and make money, and it's going to happen. I mean, maybe if you're very lucky or you've got some extraordinary talent. But even talented people, the majority of them are not necessarily successful. But I think when you stop thinking about success and you start thinking about doing everything to the best of your ability, success will follow if that's what you want. You can't, I mean, I always used to think, like, people say it's so hard to be successful, but really it's so easy. Well, actually, I mean, it's not that easy. I mean, of course, it can be very, very difficult, and depending on people's circumstances and everything else. I'm not trying to say it's easy.
But it's the fundamentals.
But everybody, I believe, every young person has it in them to be successful. But they've got to follow these principles of, instead of looking for success, focus on doing something in the moment. Whatever you're doing, if you get a job somewhere, and you just have to make the tea or whatever, do it so well that the person you're working for will notice you.
It's brilliant advice.
I mean, it's simple.
It's
and
brilliant.
It's not
simple
like,
fundamentals, right?
It's like anybody can do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to be born with that talent.
I mean, you've ripped off my next question brilliantly, because what I was going to ask you, John, is you've turned up at Leonard's. There was 40 assistants there. How did you stand out to become Leonard's assistant? And that was the answer. And my next question for you is, how important in your career was becoming Leonard's assistant?
Oh, huge. I mean, I often think back at my life. It was a bit like I was saying earlier, that when you're very much focused in the moment, sort of things happen, doors open. And, the fact that by some stroke of good fortune, which had nothing to do with me, I ended up getting a job at Leonard. I didn't know who Leonard was, but that was pure through my father's, whatever. I mean, and then after 1 month of being there, being picked to be his assistant, and you have to remember that this time, Leonard was the man of the 70s. I mean, Vidal was the 60s for sure, and he went on to, of course, do great things. But during the 70s, Leonard was it. I mean,
he was the man.
He was literally, I mean, this period of time when I was his junior and the 9 years that I worked for him, he was at his absolute height. I mean, he was the #1 choice of Vogue magazine to do all of their shoots, all of their covers. I mean,
and of course you assisted
and I
him.
was there. I was there. So, I'm going along to him to the studios with him, Vogue studios or wherever we were shooting, with all the big photographers of the time and the supermodels.
Making great contacts.
And I was just there, standing next to him, handing
learning the skills,
watching him, focusing him, watching what was going on, focus on everything he was doing, learning from him. And also it was just a fascinating time because at that time, my sort of contemporaries, I mean, I was obviously Leonard's assistant, Grace Coddington, who's, the most well-respected fashion editor of, American Vogue, but she was at British Vogue in those days, was a young assistant editor. Anna Winter, the editor of American Vogue now, was a young assistant at Harper's. And we were like all kind of hanging out
mates
together. We were like kids,
Great.
And
Amazing.
so then I was, having been opened up to this experience through Leonard, working with him, working with all these incredible photographers and editors, then, I eventually graduated to go and do sessions with them. I got to know them, of course, and they said, oh, well, send John along. Or Leonard was too busy, so they would say, well, send John.
We know John.
Whatever. Or as David Bailey would say, oh, send the oily rag. Typical Bailey. I was the oily rag, So, so I kind of would, that was how I started out, very young. And it was incredible because the early sessions, I'd only been his junior for like 9 months. I hadn't even graduated on the floor, and yet I'm being booked for Vogue to do photo sessions. And I was quite nervous and didn't know that I was even capable. But I think in those days, a lot of the editors and photographers really helped me a lot. The photographers in particular helped me look at the face. I learned a lot from them because they'd say, John, come here. I'd do the hair and they'd be in front of the camera and they'd be start to photograph it and getting his lights right. And they say, John, come here. Look through the lens, look at it, look at the shape, look at, step back. What's going on there? That needs to be smoothed out. So I learned that ability of seeing. You know, there's a very famous American book written years and years ago. It was a classic in art, studying the study of art, teaching people to draw or paint, and it was called "Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain" by Betty Edwards, and she said that, you know, in order to teach a person to paint or to draw, it's not the drawing skills that have to be learned, it's the skills of, you have to learn to see, you have to look at, and that goes back to what I said about the skills of visual perception. With hairdressers, to me, the most important skill is to teach them to look, to see the face. The technical skills are comparatively easy. So I thought about, that's why I started getting to do the portrait drawing classes, because if you teach somebody how to look and how to see, you will then, the great hairdressers, I mean, I'm talking about the top, 1% of the world's top ones, their skills are more in their ability to see and to think about what suits the person, what's cool, what's innovative, what's new, what is right for the trends of the time. These are the trailblazers, and they've all got that ability to look that, really, it's the choices they make in terms of the hairstyles that they create.
What were the positives and negative memories you had of your training? You've talked a lot about, the positives. Were there any negatives, looking back?
My training with Leonard's, you mean?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I just got on with it. As I said, a lot of my training was just standing next to Leonard. So...
There were positive memories?
Yeah, it was all positive.
And how long was your training with Leonard?
Well, it was very short. I mean, I was basically, after only being there for 9 months, I remember Leonard coming to me and saying, and there was a photographer, Barry Latigan, at the time that we worked with a lot, who was an amazing, Vogue photographer, did cover after cover of Vogue. And, I got to know Barry because I'd been at the studio with him with Leonard. I remember being called down into the reception area at Leonard's, and Leonard was standing there with Barry, and they called me over and they said, "John," and I'm like, "Yes, Mr. Leonard, you're gonna be doing a photo shoot with Barry next week for an ad for Clairol." And
how old was you, Nick? Yeah.
I was like 17, and I'd only been there for like 7 or 8 months or something. So, and he said, he showed me the campaign. I remember the model was a girl called Mickey Gardner, and they wanted to do 9 pictures. It was for a hair colour. So, and the hairstyle, it was that sort of feathered cut in the early 70s, and they wanted to use that hair style for all 9 pictures. So I had to cut 3 wigs, exactly the same, to go on this model. And there was a blonde, a dark, and a redhead. And then they would colour, colour some of the wigs. So each one, you'd go through all these 9 different shades of colour, but the same hairstyle. And Leonard said, Barry wants you to come and do this session. And I was like, I'm not ready. I mean, there's no way I can do that. You must be kidding. I haven't even graduated yet. I'm still a junior. He was like, "No, you're ready. Don't worry. You're fine." They had more confidence in me than I had in myself. And anyway, I did it, and it went very well. And I always remember that's, I noticed with the young people, the confident, I can do that. I can do that. I'm ready. I almost prefer it when I see young people who think they're not ready. I mean, it's not always the case, of course, but again, it goes back to that I'm in a hurry to be successful. I'm in a hurry to get there. I was not in a hurry. I wanted to do it properly.
Even though at 17, you was doing your own commercials.
Yeah, and that's the kind of weird, the irony of it, in a sense, is that I wasn't in a hurry, and yet I was, I think, probably the quickest junior ever to go on the floor at Leonard's, in the history of Leonard's.
So would you say you had a real natural flair, or did you ever have struggles with your training?
I don't honestly think that I particularly had a natural flair. I just think that I worked very hard, and I put a lot into it, and I put a lot of effort into it, and I didn't give up. And, I was, I think to be successful, you have to accept that there's going to be lots of times when you're going to fail, and you need to keep going. You need to, and I mean, I remember the great story. There's a lot of great stories about this, where, I mean, the guy that started the McDonald's chain. Okay, not that
Kroc.
Not that Ray Kroc. He was a guy in his 50s, and he was a salesman selling these, ice cream, things to make milkshakes.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
And, he came across this place in the San Bernardino Valley that ordered 8 of these quadruple mixers. He thought, what kind of restaurant could use that many? He went and saw the operation at McDonald's, and he had this idea, and he built this obviously massively successful business late into his 50s. And he would always say that, in my view, people always talk about talent, is the guy talented? He said, talent to me means nothing. He said, I've come across so many talented people, and they come and they tell me what they're going to do, and they've got this great idea, and it's going to be incredible. I'm like, oh, well, that's good. And then I see him 6 months later, and like, oh, what happened with that idea? Oh, it didn't work. It didn't work. We came across an obstacle, we had a problem, and we gave up. He said, there's only one thing in life that's important: persistence. You just don't give up. You don't give up. It's a long road. It doesn't happen overnight. And you've got to be in it for the long haul. And you've got to be not thinking all the time, when am I going to get there? You've got to be thinking, if I'm in the moment, if I'm doing this to the best of my ability, if I'm conscious and aware of what is going on around me, then, and I don't allow things to, if I have a setback or if I have something go wrong, I don't allow it to kind of deflate me and make me feel I want to give up. There's loads of times in my career when I felt like I wanted to give up. I mean, I had, sleepless nights. I would wake up in the morning thinking I can't do this. It's too overwhelming. The problems were insurmountable. I'd be like, I think I'm going to go and buy a little farm in the country somewhere and give it all up. I mean, so many times during my career.
Are there a couple that stand out that really got to you?
I remember once we changed bank. When I had opened my second salon, I was, in my probably late 20s.
One in New Cavendish Street?
No, it was the Orford Street salon. So I was, probably late 20s, early 30. And it was going well, but there were various things going on with the economy. One thing, cash flow was suddenly a problem, and the bank suddenly had a new bank manager, and I met with him, and he was, very nice, and we were looking at all the accounts and various stuff. And then he called me one day and said, I'm sorry, John, but we're going to have to bounce all your checks because you don't have the money in the account. And this was totally out of the blue. What are you talking about?
And where was this in your career?
This was probably when I was 30, 31.
Before you had the product line?
I was working on the products, but it was before the products I launched in 1990s. So this was
this was when you had your salons.
I just had salons. I was kind of working on my products, but I hadn't developed them yet. So it was pretty early on. It was my salon business. And it wasn't that the salons weren't doing well, but it's just, like a lot of creative people,
not great.
Always keeping an eye on the money.
Yeah.
And I just, was probably a little bit negligent of certain things. And, but I literally remember my, knees sort of turning to jelly and thinking, well, but anyway,
How did you get over that?
No, we sorted it out. I just met with him. I said, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. I mean, to be honest, it was very unreasonable of him. And anyway, I got my accountants for it, we came around. But I think that it's important to, there's times, and that thing of persistence, that you have to expect that there are going to be times when you just feel like you want to give up. And a lot of people do give up. And that's, success comes through persistence, that you don't give up. You just keep going, you keep going, you keep going. And, that was always, I think it's just so fundamental.
And what does
in
persistence mean to you? Is it the first one there, the last one to leave? Is it working harder than anybody else?
The opportunity I got at Leonard when I was picked to be his assistant, it wasn't just the folding of the towels. That was one thing that he noticed. But he also noticed that I was the first person in the morning. I was the last person to leave. They used to have to say, John, can you go? We need to lock the doors. And I was there. That was my life. Leonard often would, his schedule was very regular. You never knew what you were doing from one day to the next. And there would be often times at 6 o'clock at night when we'd finished for the day and I was about to leave. And he'd say, John, we're going to go to the studio now. We've got a photo shoot to do. That just came up at the last minute. There were many times when I had things to do that evening. I might have meeting friends, going to whatever it was. I never even once said to him, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Leonard, I can't because I'm going
Or how much am I
dinner.
going to get paid for?
Or exactly. It was like, sure, that was it.
Yeah.
And then I'd get on the phone to my friend, sorry, I can't make it. And it was like work came first. There was nothing that would get in the way of me being, again, it came back to that book, The Autopilot Yogi, being devoted to the person I work for. Whatever he wanted, came first. Now, that's an attitude that not a lot of people have.
It's a brilliant attitude.
But anybody can have.
Very simply.
And actually, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Is your going out at night, having fun so important to you? If you are that devoted and that serious about the work you're doing, the work should be fun. It was always fun for me.
It never felt like work.
It wasn't like work. It was like, this is challenging. I'm learning something really interesting that's going to help me in my life. Why wouldn't you do that? It's like crazy to me that people don't think that way. So, and I remember once somebody telling me, this was a great piece of advice. When you are struggling and you have some overwhelming obstacle to overcome and you feel like, they said, never think about your problems when you're tired. Because at the end of the day, and you've had a bad day and all stuff's come at you and you're like, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? You've just got to put it out of your mind, get a good night's sleep. In the morning when you're fresh, everything is going to seem a hell of a lot easier.
Then eat it for breakfast, the problems. What? Then eat the problems for breakfast.
Well, I always used to think, I would never think about my problems when I was tired late at night. And I would never think about my problems first thing in the morning when I woke up. Because when you wake up and the alarm goes, you've got to go up, that's like, oh my God. That's where meditation was very good, because I wouldn't allow myself to think until I'd been awake for half an hour. So I'd get up, have a shower, shave, whatever. Then when I'm fully awake, okay, I'm ready. And all those problems that, yes, they seemed so insurmountable, you figure them out.
It must be very good for anxiety, that strategy. Yeah. Have you ever suffered with anxiety?
Yeah, when I was younger, I was often, I had terrible stress, terrible anxiety for all kinds of reasons. I was, it wasn't like plain sailing. Yeah. There was ups and downs on the road all the time. Huge things later on in life with the product company when things happened that nearly, bankrupt our whole business. That were phenomenal problems. But
we'll get onto that. I'm fascinated by that era.
Yeah.
So you opened your first salon when you was 25 years old, is that correct? In Marylebone Road.
Off Marylebone High Street.
Sorry. Was that with Nicky Clark?
No, that was with Clifford Stafford.
It was with Clifford Stafford?
Yeah.
So what was it called, that salon?
Stafford and Frieda. That was in 1975.
Wow.
Stafford and Frieda, yeah.
And how was that partnership?
It was great, actually. Clifford was fantastic. But then after 3 years, there was some, conflicts that happened and it just didn't work. So
did Nicky come and join you in that salon?
No, well, Nicky was my junior at Leonard's.
So he was your junior? He was your protege?
So Nicky started... so I was at Leonard's from So I started in 1987, and I left. No, 1980. No, 1970. No. Sorry, what am I talking about? 1968.
And how long was you at Leonard's
11th of
for?
July 1968 was my first day at work, and I left on the 11th of July 1976. No, 70. It was 9 years.
9 years.
68. No, 69. I'll get it right in a minute. Okay, I'll get it right in a minute. I started in 69 and left in 78. No, that's not right. What am I talking about? 60. No. 70, 67 and 7.
The year after I was born, you started at Leonard's.
67 and 76, I think. Anyway,
So you was there nearly a decade at Leonard's.
I was at Leonard's for 9 years. So probably Nikki started at Leonard's as a junior about maybe, I'm guessing, I can't remember exactly, but a year or two before I left.
And do you think he had the same attitude as you?
I think so, yeah. I mean, Nikki also worked very closely with Leonard as well as me. And Nikki definitely picked up that same... Nikki had exactly that same attitude of he had amazing natural talent, very focused on the way Leonard worked, on the way I worked. You know, we all the three of us, we had this same... I mean, if you watch Nikki cut hair to this day... and you look at his hands moving, it could be Leonard's hands, it could be my hands. I mean, we're all moving our hands in the same way. Both Nikki and I learnt that from Leonard.
Yeah.
So, and then when I left to open Stafford and Frieda, Nikki left and came with me.
And by that time, he was a stylist.
He had become a stylist at Leonard's just before he left. So he was a young stylist, yeah.
So in 1976, you created the iconic Purdy cut on Joanna Lumley, which was a smash hit in the UK. It was a huge trend. And even today, you know, celebrities are still wearing that kind of bowl cut in a modern way.
Right.
I've just noted Rita Ora and Justin Bieber and Rihanna, you know.
Yeah.
How did that Purdy cut come about? And I know that you became very famous after that Purdy cut. How did that affect your life?
I mean, it was a great moment because it also coincided with exactly when I opened my first salon. So you couldn't have had a better, a better start in terms of, building your reputation, building your name. I used to work a lot all the time with Vogue. Pretty much. I mean, I was working in the studios with all of, the beauty editor of that at that time was called Felicity Clark, and in those days I would often have an idea of something, and then I would call a photographer like Barry Latigan or Bailey or whoever, and I would say, would you take a photograph of this hairstyle that I've done on a model or something? And we would just go in at night, and I would get Barbara Daly, a great friend, makeup artist, to come with me, and we would just do our own photo shoot ourselves. And there was
what a luxury, being able to call them kind of people.
I was working with them all the time, and we were all doing they were asking me to do favors while I come and do the hair on a particular shoot for them. And so I turned up at Barry's studio. I had a model, I can't even remember her name now, but I had cut this Purdy cut on this model who had blonde hair, and it was this kind of a simple idea of just having the fringe going all the way around. But the key to it was how and this goes back to understanding face shapes, which is so important, is how the line of the fringe shaped around the eyebrow, so it didn't go like that. It followed the contour of the face, and then it came all the way down this side to the ear, and then it graduated in the back. And anyway, we did the photo shoot, and I got the pictures from Barry, and I called Felicity Clark, the beauty editor of Vogue, and I said, Felicity, I've just done a photo shoot of a haircut, which I think is interesting. Do you want to have a look at it? And she said yes, and I took it over, and she saw it, and she said, John, this looks great. And she put it in, and it was a whole page in Vogue. And it came out in Vogue literally the month I opened my salon.
Wow.
And Joanna, who I knew because, you know, she was from her modeling days, had just got the part in the new Avengers. And she, you know, Joanna is super smart, and she realized that, you know, this is a big break for me, for her in acting, and she wanted a distinctive hairstyle. And she was looking through Vogue and she saw this haircut that I'd done. So she called me and said, John, can I come and see you? You know, I need a haircut for this new part. I like this haircut. What do you think? She came in, we talked about it. She said, do you think it'll suit me? Do you think we're good? I said, yeah, let's do it. So that was it. So I gave her the haircut. And then the next minute, you know, it was, you know, I've got newspapers ringing me up. You know,
your face in the papers.
Double page spread, Purdy Mania, the haircut that sweeps Britain. I mean, it was...
It was massive, wasn't it?
It was huge, yeah. It was like, I don't know, I can't even think of anything... Because nowadays, trends don't seem to take off in that way. I mean, I guess there was the Friends,
and the Pod.
Jennifer Aniston thing was
and then
big.
Posh
Then
Spice
there was
said that thing, didn't
Farrah
she?
Fawcett, you know, with the...
And the wedge.
The dynasty, you know, all those things.
Yeah.
Big hair.
Yeah.
But this was centered around one person. And of course, her character was Purdy in the New Avengers, so it became the Purdy Cup. So, yeah, it was great.
So this happened just before you opened up your salon. So when you opened up your salon, did it bolt out the gates or was there...
Oh, my God, I couldn't. I was booked for 6 months. You couldn't get an appointment with me for 6 months. I mean, it was like literally...
And what about the rest of the team?
Oh, everybody in the salon were all day long. From 9 in the morning till 6 at night, we're doing Purdy haircuts. I mean, it became ridiculous. And like, you know, we'd all, at the end of the day, be like, oh my God, not another Purdy haircut. But,
and how long did that go on for?
Oh, it went on for a long time. I mean, I can't remember, but you know, a year or two. I mean, it was a big thing for quite a long time. And then, you know, it got followed on by Princess Diana, the sort of slightly elongated version of it. You know, her haircut when she first met Prince Charles. It wasn't a Purdy, but it was, you know, longer at the back.
It was an inspiration,
it kind of,
wasn't it?
that
evolved.
Revived it in a sense. I mean, although it wasn't the same, but that look was around for a long time.
So I've got a question. If you opened up your first salon in 1979 on Cavendish Street, is that correct?
On my own, yes.
On your own. That was your first own John Frieda salon.
Yeah.
What was it like being a young hairdresser at the beginning of that 80s era of hair?
I mean, I don't know. It was just, I mean, I was just doing what I was doing. I didn't really, you know, I think...
Must have been exciting though, because it was all about the haircut back then. Everyone was having really strong looks, weren't they?
Oh, you mean in terms of the style, the hairstyle?
Yeah, you was a young hairdresser then. It was all about these strong cuts, wasn't it?
Do you know, my work was always quite varied. You know, I made a very conscious decision early on in my career, and I guess I got this from Leonard really, was that, you know, I didn't want to be pigeonholed as somebody who's good at cutting or as good at long hair or as good as... You know, I wanted to be good at everything. That was my kind of goal. And that was how I used to try and train the staff, you know, the stylists. Say, like, you should be an expert in everything. And I even had my uncle in the early days come to the salon and teach the staff how to do old-fashioned, like Marcel waving, you know, with the old-fashioned things like that. Not because it was fashionable or anybody would probably want to come into the salon and have that done, but it's teaching them all these very diverse skills. You know, don't just learn the skills that happen to be flavour of the month for now. You know, be able to do anything with hair in any era. Imagine you were back in the 30s or the 20s or the, you know, of any era. Could you do those looks?
I couldn't.
You know, and I mean, and I tried very hard myself to learn how to do all those things.
What was your favourite
Pin
era?
curling. I don't really have a favourite. You mean of all time in hairdressing?
Right. Is there a favourite era for you?
Do you know, I never really think about it like that. It's a bit like people saying, who's your favourite child, you know?
Yeah.
They're all different. They all have qualities.
What do you think of today's hair? Do you have a view on that?
Today's hair. I mean, it's an interesting time. I think today it's not just about hair that's interesting. Everything's interesting. I mean, we live in the age of individualism, of, you know, everybody is, you know, does their own thing and wants to be different. There isn't, you don't see like trends so much anymore like you used to. If you look back at Vidal, or if you even go back to before him, like the 50s, my dad's era, you know, people go to the salon,
a distinctive look,
a shampoo and set, rollers, they'd come out, it'd be back-combed, hairsprayed, you know, that was everybody. Or you go back before that to the 40s, you know, think of wartime hair, like you know, all those iconic 40s movie stars, Lauren Bacall, you know, with waves, and, you know, I mean, there were, I think it used to be, there were looks, distinctive looks, that most people would have more or less, you know, a variation of. But it's not like that now. Now it's like anything, everything, you know, and I think it's also not just, I always think that hair mirrors the psychological profile of society. So if you look at what's going on in society in any given era, the hair reflects it. So like, for example, if you look at the 80s.
It's like wallop, wasn't it?
The 80s was a time when women were like, for the first time saying, you know, we're taking men's jobs, right? You think about that. That wasn't the case before. It was like a real movement forward into the women into the men's world of business, whatever. And so you needed a look to help you. And if you think about fashion in the 80s, you know, padded shoulders, big hair, it was like, you know, take me seriously. Like I'm coming in there, you know, with this armor, if you like, in a sense. And every era you have that.
So what does today's hair say about today's society?
I don't even know what to say. I mean, of course, first of all, remember, I've been out of the business now for 13 years. So the last time I worked in a salon and cut hair was in 1990.
How important?
So that's 30 years ago. So I'm sort of not so much in touch.
I hear. How important was your salon business to your overall success?
Oh, it was huge. I mean, I never really wanted to open my own salon, to be honest, initially. Because after I had finished working at Leonard's, I was a bit bored with it. I just didn't think that I was going to spend the rest of my life doing this. I didn't find that, I mean, I loved it and I, you know, was good at it and I'd been, I guess, successful, you know, and built a name for myself. But I'm a very impatient person. I get bored quickly with things. I want to like do things that I haven't done. And I just thought, you know, not that I've done this, but I just didn't know that I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing
a new challenge.
I needed something, I also think I needed something a bit more mentally stimulating. As much as I love the creative side, I always felt like, to my mind, the way I always believed I needed to be as a person was to have a very equal left side, right side brain balance, okay? So the right side is the creative side, the left side is the business side of the brain. This is how we work. And so, for example, accountants, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful to accountants because they're brilliant people, but often they're not that creative. Because if you just use one side, you develop that side and the other side, you know, is weaker as a result. And the same with creative people. Creative people, they're developing the right side and therefore the business side. That's why a lot of creative people are not very good at business. And I was aware of this. I think I read a book about it. And I remember they said people of genius are equal left side, right side. Not to suggest that I'm a genius or anything, but I mean, but to aspire, if you aspire to be a genius, you need to have equal left side, right side. So people like Walt Disney, for example, you know, Leonardo da Vinci, you know, probably Steve Jobs, people like that. They were very creative, but they also were very good at business. So I always was aware of that, and I tried to develop the kind of both sides of my brain. So when
how did you do that?
Well, just by what you focus on.
Immersing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I paid attention to the business. I mean, I started...
You was interested in it?
Yeah, I was interested in it. I was like, well, particularly after that experience with my bank manager, when he said, you know, it's like, I better pay attention to this. But I think that, so what happened is when I'd finished working for Leonard's and I'd got to the point where I'd done, you know, endless Vogue covers and all the rest of it, like, you know, what I want to do now. And I was thinking of leaving the business altogether and maybe doing something else. And then I decided, you know, and then the whole product idea came to me, and I thought, I was, because I'd been developing products at a time when nobody was developing products. If you look back to when I started, which is like in the mid-70s when I first opened my first salon, that time hairdressing was really very much still caught up in the Vidal Sassoon cut and blow dry. So there were no, styling was not a word that was used. There was no styling. It was just cut, blow dry. And so all the hairdressers who had learnt this new era of cut and blow dry from the sort of 60s onwards were not trained to style hair. Vidal's salons, they didn't have rollers, they didn't have even, I think they didn't even have round brushes.
No,
it was like a Denman brush, and that was it. Hairdryer, Denman brush, comb and scissors, that was it. So nobody learned how to style hair. And then there was a big shift in hair trend, if you like, in the 60s, from the 60s to the 70s and the 80s, 80s in particular. The 80s became the era of modern styling. Think Dynasty, Dallas, big hair. You had to style hair to get those looks. Prior Vidal Sassoon, in the 50s, it was all styling. Roller setting and
setting lotion, sticky
back combing, hairspray. So you went from that like rigid styling to no styling at all from Vidal, and then into the 80s when styling became fashionable again. That era of padded shoulders, big hair, etc., etc. Now, I was, of course, during this time, although I was working in my salon, I was also working at Vogue every day, and we were always thinking. I was thinking of like innovative new techniques, new trends, what's coming next. So when this whole kind of big hair thing started, I developed a kind of a product and a technique to get this sort of big hair look without the hair being stiff. Because to me, I always wanted the hair to look natural. I didn't want it to be all backcombed and hairsprayed. So I developed a technique which at the time nobody had ever done, which was, I had a very strong lotion. It was called a thickening lotion. And I would spray it on the roots of the hair, and I would tilt the client's hair over, or the model's hair over, and I would get a vent brush and lift the roots in the opposite direction to the way that they would fall. So with the strong setting lotion, or thickening lotion, and the technique of, I developed this technique which later became known as root lift. Okay, but at the time, nobody had really thought about that. And it actually happened by accident, because I was in Milan working with Vogue during the collections, and I used a gel on the model's hair, and we scraped the hair up into these little kind of chignons, and it was very sculptured hair. And I was using a product called Tenax by Roger Galli, which was this incredible product, and you could like sculpt the hair. And the girls had these like top knots on the top of their head. And then at the end of the photo session, when I took the girl's hair down, it had obviously dried under the lights. And this girl, and funny enough, her name was Superdi, I remember the model, and she didn't have particularly thick hair. It was shoulder straight hair. But when I took the band out of the hair and I brushed it, she had like this lance made of hair, because the gel was on the roots, and the roots had dried upwards. So it, had all this root lift. So that gave me the idea of root lift. And then I went back to the salon in London at New Cavendish Street at the time, and I would use that technique on my clients, and I would get this gel and I'd put it on their roots and blow dry the hair upwards, and they had this, fabulous.
This wasn't your product. This wasn't your product.
No, this was first a different product. Yeah. It was a gel. But I got this technique, and of course everybody loved it, and it was, I trained all the stylists in the salons were doing it. But then I found it very awkward with the gel. So then I developed my own product, which was a spray product called thickening lotion. And I would spray it on the roots, which was much more practical and easy to apply. So that was my first product.
And who did you develop that with?
I developed it originally with one of the big companies, because they had something which was like a setting lotion, which was fantastic in terms of the fact that it it had a very strong hold, but it felt very natural. And then I basically bought it from them. And then as volumes grew and we needed more, they manufactured
And where
it
was
for
you
me.
selling it?
Well, initially I just sold it in the salons, and I just started putting my own little products together. I mean, I didn't go to a manufacturer. I would order that green lotion. We called it the green lotion. It wasn't even called thickening lotion. So I ordered the green lotion from them. I had a wax that a guy in Wales made for me, a little guy in Wales. I had a hairspray that I got from Wisconsin, I think in America. Fantastic hairspray. And I, just ordered the bulk. It was me and my receptionist in the office in my basement. That was the product company. And I would be ordering...
Or you'd label it up in your own name?
Yeah, no, I would buy, 5,000 plastic Boston Round bottles, and I'd get labels printed and I'd put them on the bottles and fill the stuff, and we would be selling, very small quantities through the salons. And then, weirdly, clients, people who were not clients would come to the salon to buy the green lotion because word got around. And anyway, eventually that led somebody from Boots who came to me, and they took the products into Boots, and that was when it all began.
How many SKUs did you have back then?
I had a mousse, a thickening lotion, 3 shampoos, I think 1 conditioner, and a hairspray, and that was it.
Big product.
But just going back to this whole, working in the studio, because there were no styling products that existed, I was forced to make my own because they didn't exist. I mean, there was no mousses, there was nothing. I mean, so this was really the beginning of modern styling products. And then, we started selling them a lot in the salons, and then I went to Harrods and different places and managed to get a little bit of very small distribution. But it was a very, very small scale, and I was as I said, was doing it all myself. And then Boots came along, and they said, we've heard that you've got these really, very, very good products that are interesting, and, we think this is going to be the new thing. Styling products are going to be the next wave of products. And we'd like to, trial them in our stores. Are you interested? I'm like, yeah, of course. They said, well, we're going to put them in 40 stores as a trial and see how they do. Because, they're going to be much more expensive than the average product. And, we probably, they might be fine in our big stores, but we're not going to be selling them in the, they have 2,000 stores at that time. In the small stores up in the sticks or whatever. So they gave me an order of 40,000 bottles of thickening lotion and, 28,000 jars of wax. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do this with me and my receptionist, So I'm calling all these little guys, I need 40,000 this, and I need 40,000 bottles, and I need 40,000 sprays, and I need jars and labels, and it's got to be filled. And literally I'm like, and it has to be delivered by such and such a time. So of course practically killed myself getting this stuff delivered. And then Boots said, how are you going to promote it? Are you going to be part of our BOGOs or our buy one, get one free and all this I don't even know what that is, but I don't have any...
Back then, did they?
They had it then. I said, but I don't have any money to do that, so I can't participate in any of their in-store promotions. You know all about that. But what are you going to do? How are you going to promote? I said, well, PR. I've got a lot of PR connections, magazines and TV and stuff. So I went on the Rich and Judy's show and I demonstrated thickening lotion live on the show. And I had a girl, it wasn't a model, it was just one of the girls in the office there because we couldn't afford to pay models. And also I didn't think models, better to do it on a
real person.
So I had this girl with this very fine hair. And, it's live and Judy's like, oh, so we've got Frieda and John, tell us what you're going to do. And I said, well, look, this model has got very fine hair and I'm going to show you a very quick, easy way to make it look very full and be very natural. And I picked up my thickening lotion and I sprayed it on the roots and I got the dryer out and blow dried the roots. And then I put my bit of wax and I rubbed the wax. I lifted it up. And this whole thing from start to finish was 3 minutes, okay? And I lifted her hair up and she looked in the camera and she had a mirror there. And she went, oh my God. And she started swishing her hair. And how did you do that? It was it went from thin, fine hair to this lion's mane of hair. And Judy was like, oh my God, John, that's incredible. How did you do it? That was amazing, you know, whatever. And then she's like, we're going to cut, we're going to come back, we'll have a commercial break. John will answer your questions. We came back after the commercial break. Judy turns to the camera. There was something going on in her earpiece. She said, will you please stop calling? You're jamming our switchboard.
Wow.
And, you know, she picked it up and she said, it's called thickening lotion, you get it in Boots, because they were inundated with people calling, what did he use? So anyway, end of the TV show, drove back to London from Liverpool. Thought, well, that went quite well. Little did I know, 3 days I get a call from Boots. You know, you need to get up here immediately. We need to meet with you. It's absolute emergency. I'm like, what the hell? So I'm meeting, I think, like with the manager at the Boots at the time. He said, we have never had a reaction like that. He said, in all my years at Boots, we've got 17,000 employees here. For the last 3 days, every phone in this company, even the accounts department, they're fielding calls about John Frieda thickening lotion. Why haven't we got it? Managers who'd never heard of it, customers who were going in demanding it. You know, it's because we were only in 40 stores, so nobody knew about it. And he said, we want to put it in all 2,000 stores. Here's an order for 1.2 million bottles of thickening lotion and 860,000 jars of wax. How quickly can you deliver it?
How did you cope with that?
So, I mean, I literally left the studio on the way back to London, slightly kind of reeling.
High-class problem.
Yeah, but how the hell am I going to do this?
Yeah.
Anyway, that kicked it all off. And then it kind of went from there to, you know.
Amazing. So you met, let me get this name right, Gal Federici.
Gail Federici.
Gal Federici.
Yeah. And
she became your business partner in the hair products. How did that relationship start and grow?
So, again, just extraordinary piece of, you know, good fortune, great timing. You know, I said before about every point in my life when I needed something, suddenly that person appeared. Gail had approached me. So I had done the alternative hair show for Tony Rizzo, and we did a show, and I mean, you know, the alternative hair show, and it was very much most of the shows.
In Albert Hall, was it then?
This was at the Hippodrome.
Was it the Hippodrome?
Before the Albert Hall. Most of the shows at that time were pretty much everybody was still doing haircuts and variation of haircuts. Okay, I did a show which was pure styling. It was all modern styling, very, you know, kind of elegant, quite different. Gail at the time was working for Zotos in America, which actually had been bought by Conair. And every year they did a kind of conference somewhere in the world, and they would invite a guest stylist. And there was a guy called Dwight Miller. You ever come across Dwight? No. Dwight was a great guy who had interviewed me, and he'd gone back to America, and he'd said, you should go and meet this guy, John Frieda. He's doing something very, very interesting. And I think what he's doing is like the future of hairdressing, because it's modern styling. It's not like... And Gail... So Gail... he told her he's going to be at the alternative hair show. You should go and see it. So she flew over from the States, watched the show, called me afterwards, said, I want you to come and do this conference, because what I've seen you do is like, to me, that's the future of hairdressing. She said, I'm so sick of watching hairdressers do different cuts, you know, like it's over. Cut and blow dry, cutting. You know, we've had decades of that. This is new. And it was because of big hair, dynasty hairstyles. So she recognized that this was the new trend. And she felt that I was the person to kind of, you know, push this trend through. And so I went to do this conference with her in Milan. They had 250 of their Zotos' big clients in America who came, salon owners. And I just, you know, we got on really well. I sort of realized that she's like a genius in terms of marketing. I mean, she's very, very clever. It's like, you know, when you have that meeting of minds where two people are just completely on the same page in terms of everything we were doing. We both kind of saw the future. We both knew where the future was going. And, you know, she was the part that I didn't have. I was the part that she didn't have. You know, I could do the creative stuff. I could do the hair. I could go on TV. I could talk about it, promote the product. She could do the other side of it, the manufacturing, the operations. I mean, it was just the most brilliant partnership, you know. We used to think of ourselves this might sound a bit arrogant, but we used to think of ourselves as the Lennon and McCartney of hair products, you know, like in the way that they were, you know, the two of them together were bigger than the sum of the parts. And I think we felt that that's what we had, and it was very exciting. And then she originally came over to the UK and helped me with this whole massive boots order, which, quite frankly, I wouldn't have known how to cope with, but she could do that with her eyes closed. So with her help, we got the UK product business up and running, the office up and running, but she didn't want to live in England. So she said, you know, the deal between us is that we have to launch it in America, which of course was great for me because that's what
How old was you then, John?
So that would have been,
37?
that was 19, I met her in 88. So I would have been late 30s, yeah, 36, 37.
And was that an easy decision for you to move to America?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, it's just like, I think I saw this extraordinary opportunity. And, you know, I talked with Gail about it a lot, and we just recognized, look, if you're going to put all your effort into products, and if you believe you have something unique that everybody wants, which we did, and is of really good quality, which it was, and it was, you know, something that nobody else was doing, which they weren't, and everybody wants it, then why not put the effort into the biggest market in the world? So it was, yeah, I mean, it was, to me, it was a logical step, yeah.
What was the plan, though? I mean, did you have a listing in America?
No,
or
the plan,
what did you do when you got there?
The plan was that we would open a salon on Madison Avenue, which we did. I would work in the salon, build and promote my name, and then launch the products that we had launched in the UK and America. But then what happened, which slightly scuppered, well, it didn't scupper the plan, it kind of fast-tracked it in a way, is that we came out with a product into Boots. You know, after the original, by the way, the original thickening lotion and wax became Boots' #1 and #2 selling products in the whole of personal care. I mean, they were selling so much of this stuff, it was unheard of, you know. And so we were coming up with other ideas, other new brands, you know, and we launched, then we had the idea of something for frizzy hair, came out with Frizzies, launched it in the UK. It was like the biggest selling product of all time. And we felt, I just opened my salon in America, but I hadn't really started thinking about developing the products there, but we just knew that this product was so unique that we had to get it out quickly. So instead of me working in the salons and building my name through PR, I just said, forget that, let's just get this out. And we launched Frizzy Serum in 1990 into 2 big chain drugstores, CVS and Echo Drug. And then I went around the country doing TV, demonstrating live on TV, like I did with Richard and Judy, but with frizzy hair. And within no time at all, they were selling numbers of this product which were unheard of, particularly at a price point which was more than double the most expensive product in drugstores at that time, which was Neutrogena, which retailed at $4.50, and this was retailing at $10. So it was really unheard of. They never thought they could break the $5 price barrier in drugstores. And we were selling volumes of this product at this very high price point, which were unheard of. And within months, of course, word got around very quickly. And we went from being in 2 drug chains to being in 28,000 stores all across America within a year.
Wow.
And Frizzy Serum became the #1 selling product in all hair care for more than 10 years.
Wow.
So it was an absolute kind of...
And how much did that change your life, Frizzies?
I mean, it just, the business. I don't know, I guess it's like, you know, maybe somebody who's a struggling musician and suddenly has a #1 hit record, you know, in America, remember, which is very different to UK or Europe. I mean, the market there is so huge that if you have a hit there, it's...
And how did you get onto all the TV shows and how did that
Because
happen at the beginning?
I just, you know, what I did is we had a fantastic PR organization, and they had all of my credentials, you know, my Vogue covers, my celebrities whose hair I'd done.
You'd done Princess Diana's,
Princess
didn't you?
Diana, and of course at the time
Twiggy,
that was quite a big deal. Yeah, everybody. But so I had
Beatles.
Yeah, I had this, obviously, long list of celebrity clients, and of course
Which
in America,
carried a lot of weight.
Yeah, so they would pitch me to American TV shows. John Frieda from the UK is here. These are his clients. Do you want him to come on the show? And of course they were like, yeah, great, get him on. And I would go on the morning shows, a bit like our morning shows here, but of course they were way bigger. So Good Morning America, you're going to millions and millions of people all over America. And it was live shows, and I would go on and, do what I did with Judy.
Before and afters.
I'd have a model, and I didn't talk about the products. I'd say, for example, I'd be down in Tampa, Florida, where they have huge problems with humidity, and I would have a model with frizzy hair, and I would live on the show say, look, obviously here we are in Florida, and problem with humidity, and of course, remember in those days, this was the 90s, so everybody wanted that Jennifer Aniston smooth, straight hair. So people with very, very frizzy hair who'd never been able to find a product that would tame it or make it smoother.
Slather their hair.
I would show the product, I'd wet one side down, show it, put it on the hair, dry it with a diffuser, again, live in 3 or 4 minutes, and suddenly it was like, oh my God, and there was just a run on the stores, and they couldn't keep it on the shelves. And that kick-started the whole US. It was almost like exactly the same as what happened in Boots in the UK with the thickening lotion. And then from there, we just, my salon days were over. I didn't have time to be in the salons, and I was full on products, traveling all over the world, launching more brands, Sheer Blonde, which was a huge successful brand. And
that was 9 years later, wasn't it?
That was that was kind of later, probably around, I think it was 97 maybe. And everything we did, it was like, it just was...
Tell me this, what was your testing process back then? Did you use a lot of market research, or was it guts?
No, we were very against market research. We thought market research, to be honest with you, was a joke.
Do you still feel like that?
Yeah. Focus groups, we believed, these like big companies, they go to focus groups. You can't rely on focus groups because what we did is we had people who tested our products that we knew. A lot of people are not good at testing products because they don't, they might use a product on their hair and they don't always really notice the difference. Or there might be a difference, but it could be for something else. Maybe they didn't shampoo it properly. Maybe they were not feeling well. All these things affect it. So we did our own focus groups. So we had really, tried and tested testers who we knew were smart and paid attention. And, and we would ask them, we would give them the product to try, and then we'd ask them all these like very specific questions about, what did you like? What did you not like? These things were very useful in terms of helping us come up with ideas for new products.
Because that's, of course, how you come up with Sheer Blonde, because
because Sheer Blonde was a classic example. So Gail would get all these people in the office, and she would give them a product to use. So they would use, a gel, for example. She'd say, test this gel for me. And she'd have maybe 20 different people, and she would get them tested. Then she'd get them back in the office, and she'd grill them. She'd sit them down. So what did you think of the gel? And then they'd fill in these questionnaires. And then she would look at all the questionnaires and all the answers of the questions, and she realized something very curious. She said, all the blondes answered the same question differently to the brunettes about this gel. So a brunette would say, I liked it, I didn't like it, I'd like it stronger or weaker, whatever. The blondes just said, I don't use gels on my hair because I feel it dulls my blonde hair. And when she saw that, the light bulb went on, ching, and then she came up with she said, of course, blondes are very different to brunettes. Blondes invest heavily in being blonde. It's very important for them. They spend a lot of money on it. They are not going to put something on their hair that dulls it.
No.
A brunette doesn't care. They're not going to think, well, that's going to dull my hair because it's already dark. So it's a different mindset. And so out of that came this idea for her of creating a whole brand of products, styling products, shampoos, specifically for blondes that would not only would not dull the hair, that would make the hair. And that was the beginning of the Sheer Blonde brand, which was massively successful.
Did that take over Frizz?
No, Frizz was huge, but it was at the time the biggest launch of a hair care brand in the history of hair care in America in terms of initial sales off the bat. No brand had ever been launched in as many stores with that kind of success in terms of numbers and revenue ever in the history.
Unbelievable.
It's literally went straight in at number one everywhere.
Did you ever feel in your career that you could lose it all?
We had a couple of scary moments. We had a time, so when we first launched in America, the way the setup in America, as you will probably know, is that they have regions, and in every region in America has a distributor that usually controls each region. And that was the way it was. I think they were called the Big Five or something. You had the Midwest, you had the East Coast, whatever. And usually you would go to the 5 different distributors. And there was one distributor that we had that were based in Texas. And they wanted to take the brand, nationwide. And it suited us at the time to do it because it made life easier for us because we were a small company and we didn't have to deal with all the different distributors. So they were like the head distributor, but they had distributors under them. And that was good until they ran into some very serious financial problems. And literally we thought, because if they went under, we would have gone under. And that was a very scary moment. And we were really very worried. And I remember Gail was great in those situations. She would call us into the war room. And everybody would sit down and we would have this war room strategy of okay, what are we going to do to protect the business? What do we need to do? And, she came up with some absolutely brilliant strategies that in the end save the business from going under. So, that could have, I said earlier about times in life when you really think, oh my God, it could all fall apart. And I think you have to accept that those things, I don't think any company that, I love reading business books like, Shoe Dog by the guy, the founder of Nike and things like this.
Loved it.
They all had those moments when they could have lost it all. But again, it goes back to the Ray Kroc, persistence, never give up, fight another day. Winston Churchill, that was his thing, wasn't it? Never give up, never give up, never give up.
So I've always been incredibly curious because, you was a small company compared to the big boys like Procter & Gamble. And you started and sold your company within 10 years, a very short space of time. How did you scale and grow that quickly with limited resources?
Look, to be honest with you, first of all, Gail was, she was, again, how I talked about Leonard, this genius that I was such good fortune for me to be there at that time, in that place, be picked him, become an assistant. I learned everything about hair from Leonard. Everything. It was, I always say to people, imagine you wanted to be a painter. And, Michelangelo said, come and be my assistant, stand next to me, wash my brushes and hand me my brushes. Can you imagine having that sort of experience? Yeah. That's how I felt with Leonard at that time. So that was extraordinary. And then, when I finally got to that moment of boots, when the business suddenly had to scale up very, very quickly, there was Gail, who just knew how to do it and was brilliant in everything, not just in terms of product development, packaging, design, what was written on the bottles, also doing the TV shows together, coming with me, directing me, helping me, the strategy behind it was, that was the key, really, to allowing us to just really accelerate the growth of the business. We knew about the products. We knew about the quality of the ingredients. We knew what people wanted. Gail had this extraordinary ability of knowing what the next big thing would be before. It's a bit like Steve Jobs used to say, you don't tell the customers what they want. You figure out what they're going to need before they know, and then you give it to them. And that was very much Gail. She had this
intuition.
Like a finger on the pulse of what the next thing was. So we had a very small team of people, but each person in that team was brilliant.
How
at what
big
they were
was the
doing. I mean, we started off just a small, it grew and grew and grew. I think at the time that we sold it, it wasn't, for the size of the company, it was a relatively small number of employees. We had, at that point, we had offices, all over the world. And so, I don't know, maybe, I can't remember exactly, 200 staff, something
Still
like
a
that.
lot, though.
Yeah, but not a lot for the size of the business at that time. In fact, when we sold it, the people were amazed that we had such a small team of staff compared to the sales and the size of the business. So I think that, the ideas were just coming all the time. We knew, we without sounding arrogant, we felt that we could outperform the big boys. We used to, we had these catchphrases: we're short on money, but long on strategy. We can't outspend them, so we need to outthink them. And so, we believed that we knew, and it was all really about quality and authenticity. Every product that we came out with, we weren't going to copy anybody. There were no Me Too's. There was not like, a lot of large companies, they're not necessarily that innovative. They watch what's going on in the marketplace. They see something like a Frizz's, which is a perfect example. Then they all jump on it. They didn't develop that. There was no marketing guys in Procter & Gamble, L'Oreal, and those big companies that came up with those ideas. I'm not saying they don't come up with good ideas, but they tend to be more, they think in a different way. They're chemists and scientists and marketing people. They're not hairdressers. They're not people who, are...
Live and breathe it.
Live and breathe hair at the highest level.
Yeah.
And so we had, that was an incredible, something that gave us a massive competitive advantage. So we, when we came out with a new product, it didn't Frizz. There was no Frizzy serum. There was no serum. Nobody used the term serum. Right? We invented the category. There wasn't even a Frizz category. If you go back and look at magazines prior 1990, 91, when you didn't have articles about frizzy hair in the magazines, and yet, something like 60% of the population of America got frizzy hair.
Yeah.
So we recognised there's a huge need for this product that didn't exist, and we came up with a product where there was this massive need for, and it worked. That was the thing. It delivered more than it promised.
Yeah.
So when people used it, they were like, oh my God, this is like a miracle, product. And you can't go wrong if you've got that in a business. And so we didn't need to spend, millions on advertising. We didn't need to do all that because the editors loved the products and wrote about it endlessly. They were all using the products. So there was so that authenticity, that quality of product, that innovation, that understanding what people were looking for next that didn't exist, and the fact that it performed better than they expected, is what accelerated the growth of the company. So we went from nothing to, literally double-digit growth every year. We couldn't keep up. Literally, we were like, as quickly as we would be planning for next year and thinking we need to employ more people to grow. And by the time we got there, so we were just like running year after year.
And you had someone that understood the cash flow.
Yeah, well, we had thanks to Gail, there was a fantastic team of people. All the bases were covered, good financial people, good creative people, we had our own, everything we did in-house. We never went to an advertising agency. We had our own creative, we had our own, R&D, we had our own chemist, Joe Cincotta, brilliant guy who was, worked with Gail very closely. We just did it all ourselves because we felt, if we do it ourselves, we know we'll get it right. If we give it to somebody else, who knows, maybe they won't. That's why even the focus groups, interviews focus groups, we didn't trust them. We wanted to speak to the people themselves and really question them to find out what's going on. And big companies don't do that. They just...
Well, they haven't got the intuition, have they? They haven't got the understanding.
But they've got the money. And so the money, they do it by spending millions on advertising campaigns. And power. And of course, they've got the clout. So they can go into a store and, because of their size, You know, that's how it's done, which, you know, is a shame because the small companies are, I think, the ones that are the innovators. And I think the bigger the larger companies get, as much as, of course, they will always say, no, we want creativity, it's a corporate culture that you either have or you don't have. You know, large companies like that, it's very hard for them to, you know, have that kind of corporate culture. It's just too big.
Yeah.
It's the scale is beyond, you know. Anyway.
So you started and sold your hair care line in 10 years. You was a 50-year-old...
I think it was 12 years.
Was it 12 years?
2000.
Still a very short space of time, wasn't it, right?
Yeah, 12 years.
And you was 50 years old,
yeah,
right, when you sold. And this is very well documented, right, what I'm saying now, right?
Okay.
So you sold for an eye-watering amount of 450 million. And I love saying that, John, because people say you don't make any money out of hair, right?
Yeah.
And your life must have changed dramatically after you sold, because the next day, you haven't got to get out of bed unless you want to, you haven't got to do any work unless you want to. You've become the richest hairdresser that's ever lived, but you spent your whole life building this brand, and the next day it's gone. How was that for you? Did you feel lost for a while, or was it parties every day?
It definitely wasn't parties every day. My party days ended a long time ago.
How was it?
There's always, of course, lots of emotions and feelings when something like that happens, particularly as we weren't really, you know, thinking of selling the company. It wasn't like, that wasn't what we knew one day we would. But it kind of, we were being pursued constantly by people who wanted to buy us. And in the end, I don't know, it just seemed for lots of reasons the right time. And, you know, we just took a decision to do it. But it was really unexpected. You know, it was like suddenly, oh my God, we sold it, it's gone. And I do remember that. I was in New York at the time, then the morning after, waking up and thinking, you know, I don't really have to set my alarm anymore. I can do whatever I want today. I mean, fortunately, I'm the kind of person that I could never be bored. I've always got a million things. I've got more things that I want to do in my life than I'll ever have time to do. So that wasn't an issue. I'm also somebody who I think by nature can change quickly in directions. You know, like I don't get set in my ways. I'm not somebody who gets caught up with habits. I'm not habitual in what I do. I'm always looking for variation, doing things differently. What I do tomorrow, I don't want to do the same tomorrow as I was doing today. And that's just been my life. So it wasn't a difficult transition for me because, you know, it was like, great, now it's a question of what am I going to do? What am I going to do with my life? I've got all these options. You know, I'm in a very fortunate and privileged position. You know, a lot of my Eastern philosophy came into this, you know, about trying to think of what is working towards more of a higher purpose of life, not just, you know, it was never for me about just making money for the sake of making money. I mean, don't get me wrong, very lovely, nice to be able to live nicely and well and buy nice things. But I never had an attachment to that, if you know what I mean. It was like, you know, I could live with it. I mean, I think I could do pretty well without money. I mean, I say that. I might have surprised myself if I was in that position. But I do feel like as I've got older, you know, I've realised in life it's not material things that make you happy. As lovely as they are to have them, and I, of course, recognise that people who are at the other end of the spectrum living in poverty, you know, it's a very different situation. It's awful so I don't want to, I'm not saying, you know, money's not important, because if you don't have any and you struggle in life, it is very, very important. Yeah. But I think there are statistics that show that once you get to a certain earning level, and I don't know what it is, I think it's like 30,000, 40,000, I don't know what it is, your happiness does not go up proportionally to your wealth. So there's a big jump in happiness if you go from, I don't know, these might not be the right numbers, but let's say 30 to 40,000 or 40 to 50,000, those times. But once you get up to like 80,000, 90,000, 100,000, whatever, your happiness doesn't change that much. So, and I've also known just from years of being interested in Eastern philosophy and reading books about spirituality and what makes people happy is that, and I know from my own experience from being around lots of very, very wealthy and famous people who are as miserable as sin, you know, that those are not the things that make you happy. So to my mind, it wasn't, you know, I didn't think when I sold my business, a lot of people, when they sell their business, they think, okay, now how can I make another 400 million or 50, you know, whatever. And I was like, you know what, I've got more money than I ever need. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do something else in my life that I find more fulfilling and more satisfying. And also, I want to be a role model to my kids. You know, I was like, very mindful that I've got kids and grandchildren, and I want to conduct my life in a way that, because you can't teach your kids by telling them anything. You can only teach them by showing them. And I got that from my father. My father was a great role model. He didn't tell me how to be. He showed me how to be. I saw him. I saw a man who was unselfish and kind and gave to others before he gave to himself. You know, didn't need stuff for himself. Didn't matter to him, stuff. You know, didn't make him happy. What made him happy was if his kids were happy, and, you know, he was an incredible man. So I think the change for me, it opened up just new horizons and new possibilities, which, you know, I mean, I'm still working on today.
So you never felt retired? You never felt retired?
I don't even know what that word means. I mean, you know, you can retire from working in a business that makes money, but you don't retire from life. I mean, I'm busy doing loads of things, you know, loads of projects of all, you know, all kinds of stuff.
So looking back, what part of the journey did you feel like you'd made it?
Well, it depends what you call made it. You know,
what does made it mean to you? What
does
made it mean to you?
Well, I mean, you can feel you've made it in terms of material success, and obviously by, you know, when the product company got to a certain level where we felt we were secure, we were big enough that, you know, we've created a very substantial, valuable company, and that I probably realised that money was never going to be a worry for me. And that's a big thing. You know?
What age was you then?
Well, it would have been prior to me. So I was 50 when I sold the company. But I would say from the early 40s, mid 40s onwards, we were beginning to feel we've got, you know, we've kind of got there. But that to me is not making it. I think making it in terms of, you know, your true purpose of life, what's really important in your life. Like, you know, to me, the goal in life is to, you know, Aldous Huxley, when he died, or before he died, was asked a question. You know, this is a pretty smart guy, you know, academic. He said, what do you think of all the things you've learned in your life? What do you think is the most important? If there was one thing you could tell to people, that the most important thing you learn, what would it be? He said, you know, life, in the end, only comes down to one thing, in my opinion. It's about being kind to people. That's it. If you reach a stage in your life where every day of your life you are aware and conscious and focused on just being kind to people, to everybody, strangers, different people, you know, that's where you got. And so, to me, getting to that point, and I'm not saying I've reached that point, but to me,
how far are you away?
I don't know. You have to ask all the people around me. Is he kind? That miserable old bugger is always losing his temper. No, I think that's the sort of end. That's, if you like, the point when you could say I've made it. When you've reached that point in life where whatever happens in your life, you know, it doesn't. You just. I'm not saying it doesn't affect you. Of course, things happen that are terrible, you know, can make us very, very sad, very unhappy, you know. But, you know, again, the whole Buddhist philosophy, Eastern philosophy to me has always been, you know, very, very out there for me, right at the forefront of everything I'm doing. You know, the Buddha, the truths of Buddha, the first truth of Buddha is life is suffering. You know, that suffering, rather than something that we all want to avoid, is actually the teacher. You know, we only learn through our suffering. And this is something that the ancient mystics and, you know, shamans and wise men from years have always known this, that they don't look at, you know, we can't you can't control what's going to happen to you in your life. You know, if I walk out the street and get knocked down by a bus or something, you know, I can't control that, but I can control how I respond to it. So understanding that and realizing that there are going to be things in our life that are going to come out of the woodwork, that are not going to be what we expected or planned, that are going to be cause us a lot of suffering and pain. But that's actually what life is. And if we can kind of accept it and embrace it and ask ourselves, what is this teaching me, this suffering I'm going through at the moment? You know, there is this thing in the world today about, you know, suffering's bad, don't suffer, you know, like just have fun all the time. You know, I think we've lost the understanding of what life is really about, which is it's not to say anybody would want to bring suffering on anybody, but it will happen. And you have to look at it in a positive way and in a constructive way and try and understand. So, I mean, I guess making it, if you like, in life, what is, if you can embody that philosophy of life, if you can live that, if you can try and live with that understanding, then I think you're in a pretty good place.
How valuable was your dad's advice, Isidore, on working and learning from the best?
I mean, it was invaluable, you know. I mean, you know, again, I think, you know, I am grateful every day of my life that I was born into the family that I was born into, that I had the parents that I had that would just, you know, and I know that many, many people don't have that. They don't have that start in life. I mean, you know,
support.
I mean, well, not only do they not have the support, often a lot of young people have the opposite. They have, you know, parents that abuse them and who beat them and who, like, I mean, it's like, that's not easy to deal with. And our society isn't always, you know, supportive of an understanding of those people who had those. You know, you come into your life in a horrific situation, and as a result of that, you don't know how to behave, you don't know how to integrate. And then society, you know, beats you up a second time because you can't fit into life. I mean, that's a real, so, you know, I'm very well aware that for whatever reason, I had incredible parents who taught me things that, you know, I appreciate to this day.
And how much influence did your dad have on your ongoing career? Did you sit around the table talking about it?
I mean, my dad was great because, you know, he used to say to me, and this is why he was so clever and so brilliant, really. As my business became more and more successful, he was always there, and, you know, I would go to him always for advice and talk to him or whatever. And he would always say to me, look, John, I'm going to give you this piece of advice, which, you know, you should think about, but don't do it if you don't think I'm not telling you it's the right advice. I could be wrong. You'll know if it's right or not.
I love that.
It was never like telling me, you should do this, you should do that. Trust me, I'm older than you. I'm more experienced. You're making a mistake there. Never said that. He would see things that I was doing that he thought might be wrong, and he would tell me, but he would always say, I could be wrong. You know, you decide. He kind of, I think it's very important with your kids that you empower them, even as young kids, that you know, and I made this mistake with my first son, Jordan. I was too much like always saying, Jordan, you should do this, you should do that, you should, you know, and it took me a long time to realize that that's not what he needed from me. And actually, thank God, you know, he was smart enough to tell me that because, you know, he was very bright. He went to Cambridge, studied philosophy, got a degree in philosophy. And I remember him saying to me, Dad, you know, I love you very much. And you're a very smart guy, but do me a favor, don't give me advice unless I ask you for it. And actually, it wasn't said in a mean way, but it was, I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
Like, I am me, I'm not you, you know. I have to find my own life, and you have to let me.
I like the way I love the way your dad phrased that. Your dad must have been incredibly proud of you.
Oh,
What did he think of your achievements?
Oh, I mean, you know, of course, he was, you know, he came from a very, you know, my grandfather, you know, escaped from Poland during the, you know, late 19th century, during the pogroms, the Jewish persecutions, came to England as a 14-year-old, kid with nothing, taken in by a Jewish family in the East End, opened his little barber shop, had 4 kids. I mean, they were very, they came from tough beginnings and working class. And so for my dad, and that's, it's funny also the fact that my dad always talked about, how much my grandfather loved Britain, loved this country, came here from the most, destitute situation and was taken in and allowed to prosper and do well. And, they loved this country. My grandfather, my dad loved this country. And he felt that, in this country, you could be anything you want to be. You could do anything you want to do. I mean, things have changed a lot, I guess, now. But he was, to see me grow up from sort of humble beginnings from my grandfather and my father and, have the success that I've enjoyed was for him, of course, like the dream, the dream.
Yeah. Isn't it your 20-year anniversary this year when you sold? 20 years ago.
I'm not really sure. I think we sold in 2022. 2022. So, so it would have been last year. No, it would have been this year, yeah, I guess.
2001 you sold, didn't you?
Oh, sorry, 2002.
Was it 2002?
Did I say 2022? That's today. We're not in there yet. I sold in the future. No, 2000, we sold, I think we sold in 2002.
So that's nearly 20 years ago.
So nearly 20 years.
I mean, that's nearly like a lifetime ago, isn't it? 20 years.
Yeah.
And I know that you're an incredibly busy man. We can all tell that. And I know that you're a very private man as well. How have you been spending your time over the last 20 years?
Well, when I sold the company, I remarried and I had 2 young kids, and also I adopted a stepdaughter from my wife's previous marriage. So, who at the time when my eldest, Layla, was born, well, Jordan is my oldest, but of the two kids that I had with Avery, Asia, my stepdaughter, was 5 when I met, when we got married. And then Layla was born and Jackson was born. And so that was clearly, I was living in America at the time. I didn't really have a home in the UK. Avery was living here, so I came back to the UK, which I wasn't actually expecting to do. I thought my life was going to be in the US, to be honest, and continue working with Gail on other projects. But anyway, that changed unexpectedly. I came back here, had kids, and of course that was great, and it was a really great time for me because I was able to spend a lot of time with them, which of course, when Jordan was born, I was a bit of a, the workaholic father who was just, running. So, there was a period of just enjoying life and learning to relax more and slow down and not have to be running all over the place and not having that huge amount of stress that you have, of course, when you're running a business. And then just got into different things that I, wanted to do. I mean, you remember the charity hair raising that we started? You were part of that.
I got lost. My wife came last.
On the bike?
The bike ride.
On the bike ride, yeah. Things like that, which I felt, I wanted to just get involved in some charitable things, which I
Why
did.
was that such a passion for you, Great Ormond Street?
I mean, to be honest, it was, they approached me. It wasn't like, I was thinking of wanting to do something in the charitable sector, but I didn't know what. And I also didn't want to just be a person, I like to get involved in what I'm doing. I didn't want to just be on a board. I like to be more, down at the coalface, if you like. So things that I wanted to work with, I wanted to try and, get quite involved with. So I was approached by somebody to help them raise, it was £4 million to build a new operating theatre, 2 new operating theatres, and that was how that started, and that was something we did. And then after that, just got involved in other different charitable endeavours that I really enjoyed doing, and got quite involved with the young kids that we were trying to help. So that took up a fair amount of time. Obviously, my kids, my family took up a lot of time. I read a lot. I'm trying to get to, my ambition is to be like Warren Buffett, who reads 80% of his waking time he spends reading. That's my goal.
Wow.
I'm not there yet.
Where are you with that?
A long way from that. But he's got a few years on me, so I can maybe...
So you obviously enjoy reading?
I love reading. I read whenever I can. So that, and I'm very active. I like sports. With the kids, we ski a lot. I practice Tai Chi. I teach Tai Chi. Really? I've become a Tai Chi teacher, which I think is a wonderful pastime. Very, great thing to do. Travel a lot. Few business things. We still have the salons that we run, and although I'm not directly involved with them, they're still going in New York and in London, and we have
going successfully.
Yeah, doing well, and so there's lots that fill my days, and there's lots of things that I haven't done that I want to do. I'm actually in January starting a psychotherapy course at Regent's College, learning to not to become a psychotherapist, but to, a lot of the work I do in charities about helping young people with mental illnesses. And so it's useful, for me to just learn a bit more to understand their problems. And so that's kind of exciting, which starts in January. I've been toying with the idea of learning Spanish, which I'm thinking I might start doing. There's lots to do, it's just...
How important is it for you to give back?
I think my own belief is that, if you want to really be happy in your life, the only way you can ever really be happy is to give. I just know that to be true, and I've experienced it. I've seen it with people. I know a lot of people. I'm fortunate enough to have friends and people that I've met and know well who are just great givers. They're givers, and I see they radiate happiness, they radiate joy. You meet them and they're people you want to be around. They're the people you want to be around those people. You don't want to be around people who, are just taking all the time. And, my dad, in his simple wisdom, always used to say, John, remember, there's only 2 types of people in the world, givers and takers. Just remember, make sure you're a giver. Simple. It's so simple. And
simple fundamentals again.
Yeah, it's like that's, if you ask anybody, what do you want in life? I think most people say, we want to be happy. Okay, so what is it that makes you happy? And I can tell you just, money and material things and taking for myself, it won't make you happy. I've seen it, I know it. Giving, and you don't have a lot. You don't have to have a lot to be a giver. Some people, they don't have anything, but they give of their time, of their, they're present for people. You see them, and we need more of that in the world. The more people can just try and spend their time thinking in that way, the more problems we're going to solve.
Wise words, John Frieda. Your dad's initial thoughts when you wanted to be a hairdresser, his initial thoughts was no, right? Yeah. What would you say to your children if they wanted to be a hairdresser today?
What I would say is, look, if you really want to do that, I would never talk you out of it. But it is, you have to have a passion, because it's a hard profession, I think. It's you're very, there are probably easier ways to earn a living, but maybe not everybody is looking for an easy way to earn a living. I think all professions in life, if you want to make it to the top, it's challenging. The thing about hairdressing is it's physically demanding because you're on your feet all day. It's mentally and emotionally demanding because you're dealing with people. You know, you're having to often be a bit of a psychotherapist, you know, listen to their problems, whatever. You're dealing with staff, colleagues. You know, sometimes hairdressers can be somewhat temperamental in terms of, not that I'm singling out hairdressers, because I think in this day and age anybody can be, but it's a you know, there's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, a lot of strain. If it's what you want, if it's what they want to do, and they want to get pleasure in, and they feel they'll get pleasure and enjoyment and fulfill from that, I wouldn't tell them not to.
And would they need to work for the best?
I would advise them that they should. You know, I think to me that was a big lesson, and I would say to anybody, if you want to go into hairdressing, try and get a job working for the best person you can, or you know, any profession, any profession. If you can work for somebody who's at the top of the profession, I mean, you know, get a job in the best place you can get a job, and try and find somebody who can inspire you and who can, you know, who you can really learn from. You don't want to be working for somebody who doesn't inspire you. And I think if you are working in a place and you put all that heart and soul and effort into it and fold the towels beautifully and do all of that that I did, and the boss doesn't recognize that, then I think you might want to think about maybe going somewhere else. Because if you're giving that to an employer, that's valuable, what you're giving him. And you need to know that the person you're working for appreciates that you're doing that. And so it works both ways. You need to be a great employee, but it's no good being a great employee if you don't have a great employer. You know, that's what you need, and that's what you should look for in life. Somebody who you really have huge respect for, who also, you know, doesn't just talk the talk, but walks the walk. You know, practices what they preach, doesn't talk about, you know, a lot of bosses talk about the way you should be, but they don't, you know, I think you want to work for somebody who is an example of their principles in their day-to-day and their everyday, the way they conduct themselves. I think that's really, really important. A lot of my inspiration, if you like, from when I started my business, and, you know, remember I was 25 and I had my own salon and I didn't really have a clue about what I was doing. And I, you know, I talked about the sort of Eastern philosophy and things that had inspired me through reading lots of Eastern philosophical books. And there is one particular book which anybody in India would know about, called the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is a very small book. And it's sort of, I guess you could probably say that it's, you know, what the Bible is to the Western world, the Bhagavad Gita would be to Indians. And it's a book that everybody knows and everybody reads. And it's a very small book. And it's a sort of there are 18 verses in this book, and each verse is about, you know, how to live your life, you know, in a spiritual way, in a way of, you know, really fulfilling your true potential as a human being. And I was introduced to this book and I read it and it really inspired me, and I still read it. I read it and reread it. Mahatma Gandhi actually read it every day of his life, and it was one of his 3 possessions when he died. He had the Bhagavad Gita, his old sandals and his glasses, and it's a real lesson for life.
This is the one you're going to give me?
I'm going to give you a copy,
Okay,
yeah.
brilliant.
There's many, many translations of it, and there are some better than others, but there were 2 particular things that really helped me in my business when I would give my staff meetings. One of them was, it came under the heading of, this wasn't exactly the heading, but the teaching was that one has to, in life, one has to act not for the fruit of the action, but the reward is in the action itself. So in other words, if I would put that in terms of what I would say to my staff, I would say, look, if you want to be successful, you know, when you have a client sitting in front of you, the only thing in your mind should be, this is going to be the best haircut that this woman or man has ever had in their lives, okay? That's the action. So all of your energy and effort and passion and heart and soul goes into giving that client the best service, best haircut, whatever, okay? The fruit of the action is the payment you get afterwards. So the teaching was, don't think about the fruit of the action. Don't think about the reward. That's not important. The most important reward is what you're doing, your action. And it could be anything. It could be, like, as I said before, sweeping the floors, folding the towels. You're not, as you're doing it, thinking, what am I getting for this? You know, how much am I being paid? Is it worth the effort and the energy? Those are not what matters. So in this book, this was a very, very important teaching, so that you were working not for the reward, but the real reward is in doing the job well, okay? So that was one teaching which I would always tell all the staff. And what I did myself, that's how I conducted
myself. And how did they respond to that? Did they take it on board?
No, I think it's like anything. You keep telling somebody the same thing over and over, the penny drops. And some will respond better than others. Some got it, some didn't get it. You know, again, you know, you have to, I always think of, like, in the early days of my business, my salon, it was almost like your staff were almost, not disciples, I don't mean it in that way, but, you know, you have to have a real vision about what you believe in as a company and what you feel makes you as good as you want to be, as good as you are. And everybody has to, like, be behind that vision. You have to share the vision. You can't have and I think,
like a culture, you mean? A
culture. And I think a lot of the problems today in the world we live in is that it doesn't exist anymore. Everybody can do what they want. It's individualism. We're not, you know, if you want a team, having that team of people who've got a great philosophy, like, you have to go into your business every day thinking, you know what, we're really good at what we do and we believe it. It's not just talk. It's because the passion and the effort that we make, you know, we go the extra mile. We put so much into it. That's what makes us good. You know, it's the persistence thing that I talked about before. So anyway, so that was one very important lesson. The other very important lesson, which is perhaps a little bit harder to understand, but really crucial, certainly for me in my life, is that you mustn't be attached to the outcome of your actions. Okay, so let me give you an example. Let's say you decide, I want to accomplish a particular goal. It could be anything. And you really want to do it. And you put all of your effort and energy into making it happen. But in the end, you fail. It doesn't happen. For whatever reason. Maybe it was your fault, maybe it was somebody else's fault. You have to let go of being attached to wanting that outcome to be what you wanted. Okay? Which is very hard, because people think, like, you know, I really put so much effort into getting that thing and then I didn't get it. What a waste of time.
There's the pot of gold.
Yeah, why didn't I get it? Well, that was a waste of time. It wasn't a waste of time. Nothing is a waste of time. That energy that you put in, even though it didn't get that result, was there, and something came of that. Something of value came of that. Whether it might not have manifested in the thing that you wanted, but actually not getting it is an incredible lesson for you to learn something. It's like failure. You know, seeing failure not as a bad thing. Like, successful people are never afraid to fail. They might work very, very hard to accomplish an outcome, but when they don't get it, they might be disappointed, but they don't then walk away head in the hands, oh my God, that's it. It's like, okay, great. What can I take that's positive out of that? And also to understand that whatever happens in our lives is meant to happen. It's inevitable. You know, the choices we make are the choices that we make. We could never have made another choice, because had we have made another choice, that would have been the choice that we made. You know what I mean? So there's like, you know, let go of this kind of angst of, am I going to make the right choice? Am I going to make the right decision? That isn't to say that you should be indifferent about it, or like, well, who cares? What difference does it make if I... Of course, it matters, and you should try hard to make the right decision. But then once you've made the decision, letting go of the attachment to the outcome is really important in life. And that's one of the great learnings from all of these sort of Eastern philosophy, is this attachment. It's not the things that make us happy or not happy, are not the things themselves, it's the attachment to them. You know, you can do things you enjoy, you can have pleasure, whatever. But do it without attachment. Realize that we're not in control. We're only in control by understanding that we're not in control. That's kind of gives us the best level of control we have. Because then it's like a liberation in a way. You know, whatever happens is, You've tried your best, but that's how it's meant to be.
John Frieda, thank you for sharing that incredible story. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that right?
Right, should we have a drink?
Yeah.